Today is December the 7th, 2007, and we're in Trenton, Texas, and today we're going to interview Tom Holmes, who is the editor and publisher of the Trenton Tribune, and is a descendant of an early Trenton family. Tom Mack, thank you for doing this. I guess it's kind of a historic event to be doing this on December the 7th, which certainly, as Franklin Roosevelt told us, is a day that'll live in infamy. So I hope this interview lives in infamy, or maybe I don't.
Or maybe I don't either. That might be a two-way street.
That might be two-way. The good news is I've known Tom Mack practically my entire life. We lived across the street from each other and played together as children, even though he's a little bit older than I am.
Yeah, but we rode bicycles together.
And played croquet. You had the only croquet set up in Trenton, as I remember.
Yeah, I got that from Manager O'Reilly.
Tom Mack, tell me about your grandfather. I believe he was a doctor here in Trenton.
Yeah, he was a doctor here, Dr. W.C. Holmes. He graduated from the University of Virginia, got his degree in medicine there. He entered the Civil War as a doctor. He was a captain. And he was in one of the battles he was involved in. He got a bone shot out of his arm. And they removed part of that bone. He had no use of one of his hands. I believe it's his right hand. However, he could still write with it, but he had to pick it up with his left hand and place it wherever he wanted to, because there was no bone up in the shoulder part of that bone was shot out. After Civil War ended, he started roaming around the country. He went to Galveston first, then he went to Houston. He didn't like it down there, and he started his journey toward Dallas. He got to Dallas and he didn't like that. Pretty hard filler to satisfy, evidently. And he wound up this way toward Trenton, or what was to be Trenton. And he wound up in Pilot Grove. He got there, and in the Lee Peacock feud, their doctor had been murdered, Dr. Pierce, and they needed a doctor. So he set up his first practice over there at Pilot Grove, his medical practice. And he was pretty satisfied there. He married and started his family at Pilot Grove. But then the Denison and Southeastern Railroad was plotted from Denison on down south toward Mineola. And through Whitewright, Leonard, there was no Trenton. So they decided to move over here to this location. He bought some property here, and what is now downtown Trenton, the north part of the railroad, north of the railroad track here, which is now downtown Trenton. He bought that, and he started laying it off in lots, and he started naming streets. He named the streets after his children.
So Pearl Street is named?
Pearl Street is named for his daughter Pearl, who married Will Conley. And Will died at a very early age, but together they had Irene, Anna Laurie, Biff, and Holmes Conley. And Anna Laurie was a noted educator, as you well know, in Dallas.
Yes, she worked there when I did, and she was almost a legend with the Dallas School District.
Evidently.
I'd forgotten how you all were kin, but now I remember.
That's it. Now, Pearl was my half-aunt. Her mother and the Pearl and another daughter were going back to Mississippi soon after they moved to Trenton. or right about that time.
So were all the children born? Were all of WC's children born here in Trenton?
No. With the exception of Fred Holmes, they were all born over at Pilot Grove. And to the best of my knowledge.
And then so the family moved when he decided to move here. He already had a family.
I take that back. My dad was born here. They moved here in 1881, and my dad, Tom Holmes, and his brother Fred Holmes were born here at Trenton. And he set up his medical practice here. Then he also branched out. He had an office at one time at Blue Ridge, and I don't know if he had an office at Graybill or not, but he did a lot of practice down at Graybill. As a matter of fact, they named the town Graybill, which is over in Collin County, between, it's just west of Westminster, after his horse that he traveled with. His name, he called him Graybill. And so when that community was established, and he was the physician over there, they just named it after his horse, whose name was Graybill. Then he practiced medicine here, and by the way, he also got his degree in law and practiced law for a brief period of time.
It's law and medicine.
Yeah, he couldn't make up his mind, evidently. So but he wound up practicing medicine. But he also got his degree in law, and he practiced law for a brief period of time. Of course, the Civil War really interrupted his life, and his wound that he received in there was no help at all to him with his arm being in the condition that it was. He lived here at Trenton until 1924, when he passed away. Now, what I was going to tell you about when they were going to Mississippi, Pearl's mother, and Pearl and another daughter by the name of Carrie Mabry got to New Orleans, and there was a cholera epidemic down there. Carrie Mabry and W.C.'s wife contracted cholera in New Orleans, and they passed away, but Pearl survived, and she got back to Trenton. Then, after she passed away, my granddaddy married her cousin, Laura Abigail Hamilton, who was my grandmother, and brought her Pilot Grove, and that's where, I don't know where they were married, but that's where they first set up housekeeping after his first wife died, who was Pearl's mother.
That cholera epidemic was a big thing right after the Civil War, wasn't it?
You know, I don't know, but evidently it was.
Because one time we were visiting in somewhere in Mississippi, and visiting a historical site, and that they talked about that terrible cholera epidemic that happened right after the Civil War.
So they were probably victims of that epidemic that
right.
You're referring to
That
and
I
have heard
about.
about. Yes.
Well, Tomac, so he was here and he died in 1924, and so what year was your dad born?
1882.
I didn't.
Here at Trenton.
I didn't realize that. Of course, I knew your dad, but
Sure.
I didn't realize that he was. He was such a distinguished man, Tomac. I remember, and he did healthy things before it was healthy. I remember he walked back and forth most every day to his office.
That was the walkingest man you ever saw.
I remember
Absolutely.
seeing it, but he's always dressed to perfection when he was walking.
Yes, he always wore a suit and a tie, and he looked the part, I guess.
He did. He was the editor in chief. Well, so your grandfather died in 1924, and then
my grandmother died in 1916. Laura Abigail. She was a Hamilton.
And so that's where Hamilton Street is named after.
Right.
I did not know that,
Right.
that all those streets were named after your family.
Carrie Mabry Street was named for the child that died of cholera.
Uh-huh.
Pearl was named for Pearl. Augustus was named for Gus Holmes, is another son.
Oh, that's what I was going to... Gus was your dad's brother, was it?
Right.
Tell me about of course, I loved your Uncle Gus. Tell us about Uncle Gus.
Gus Holmes was nothing more than a walking encyclopedia. And
an institution in Trenton.
he was, for a fact. He was a great man, and he could talk about just about anything in the past that ever happened up until the time he passed away. His mind was very clear, and it's just a shame that somebody didn't get a tape recorder and sit down and capture some of the knowledge that he had about the history of Pilot Grove, Trenton, and
Now,
this whole area.
He knew, Tom Mack, didn't he know a lot about that Lee Peacock feud?
There was a lot there that they knew, but they discussed it among themselves. Gus, Tom, Fred, W.C. Holmes, another brother. They discussed it, but when they brought the subject up, they either left or everyone in the room was asked to leave, because when they started talking about that, they knew a lot, but they would not discuss it with outsiders.
Yeah.
And up until Mr. Gus, or Uncle Gus, some of the last times that I've talked to him before he passed away, I think he passed away in about 1964, 63, somewhere along in there, he still wouldn't talk about the feud.
I know, because, my mother, when she was doing her master's thesis, she may have been doing it on the history of Pilot Grove, because she and my daddy also lived at Pilot Grove at one time. And she interviewed Mr. Gus for part of her master's thesis, because you're right, he knew, everybody in town knew he knew every bit of history there was to know about Trenton. I forgot what Mr. Gus's wife.
Georgie.
Oh, yes, because
Miss Georgie.
Miss Georgie, yes.
Yeah, Miss Georgie and Mary Atkins got in the variety store business up here in downtown Trenton. I guess it's back in the 30s. And they had a variety store for several years in the building now where the Masonic Lodge is located. And they called it the Trenton Variety Store, I believe.
Well, that was still here in the 50s, wasn't it?
They weren't involved in it in the 50s.
Because they sold the Ayers. I guess the Ayers.
Oh, that was Ayers Dry Goods.
Oh,
T.W. Ayers Dry Goods.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. E.W. Stewart came in after the variety store closed, and he opened up a bee honey manufacturing plant or processing plant in that building. Then the Masonic Lodge got it in 1956 and moved the lodge over there from across the street, and it was originally located in an old ironclad building that the Assembly of God Church met downstairs, and the Masonic Lodge had their meeting area upstairs. That building was actually at the head of Hamilton Street here and faced Pearl Street, right out in the middle of this open area. Then it was moved to that location, and I think it was a grocery store to start out with when it was up in its former location. Jim Donahue bought the building from the Masonic Lodge, and they tore it down. It was getting pretty seedy by the time 56 in the late 50s or mid 50s.
I remember Miss Georgie and Mr. Gus, because they came to church where we went to church when I was a child. Well, I know you've seen lots of changes in Trenton, but tell me how your dad got into the. Did your grandfather start the Tribune, or did your daddy start the Tribune?
It was more or less just kind of a partnership deal between the two. My dad was worked in Paris for the Paris Daily Advocate, a newspaper that was over there that went out of business, and he worked there for a long, long time in Paris. And so in 1909, the writing was on the wall for the old Paris Advocate. So he came back to Trenton, and he jobbed around at various print shops around the area for a period. And then in 1909, my dad, Tom Hamilton Holmes, and Dr. W.C. Holmes decided that they would start a newspaper here in Trenton, and so they did. And they picked the name Tribune because at one time there was a Baptist preacher here who started a Trenton Tribune a few years before that, but it didn't go over. And so they took the name a Tribune that actually was derived from a former brief newspaper here in Trenton. And my granddad was the editor, and my daddy's title was publisher. And then their brother, Fred Holmes, or my dad's brother and W.C.'s son, he also worked at the paper, but he was never an owner of it. And
so has it always been a weekly? Or
always.
It was always been a weekly. Tomac, is it now? Is it one of the oldest weekly newspapers in Texas, or is it the oldest?
Well, by rights, it's not near the oldest. It's I guess considered as one of the newer ones. Really, it's unbelievable. It was founded in 1909. That's 98 years ago, on October 22nd, when they got their first issue out. And but there's several newspapers that are way much older than that, go back in the 1800s.
That are still in publication?
They're still in publication. The Leonard Graphic, for instance, its longevity is back in the 1800s. White Right Sun.
But those papers don't have the same owners or the same publishers, do they?
No, they've never had.
Are you so? Does the Tribune, do you think, has the longest continuous in the same family?
I hope it does.
I bet
you never know.
I bet
you
it
never
does.
know.
Because I do know. The White Right Sun was owned by the same people for a long time, was it not? Till he died.
Glenn Dawes and Jim Wagner were partners in that at one time. Zeb Spearman, I think, was the guy that founded the White Right Sun, and I think the guy that founded the Graphic at Leonard was a Mr. Thomas, and his nickname was Graphic Thomas.
Well, Tommy, tell me how I know you have a museum almost of printing equipment, because I know the children at school, we've been through it, and I know you give tours of that. But tell me a little bit about how that printing business, how much it's changed, and what, how have you kept records of all of those? Do you have copies of all those newspapers?
Yes, I do. And
what a treasure.
Yes, and they're the originals, and they're in such condition that I don't open them up anymore. I've got them sealed up there, but they're still there in a special area. I made a container to contain them, and by dang it, always, I tell you what, I'm getting so many of them up there, I'm running out of space because they're all there. Of course, there's some that are missing. Of course, something's happened to some of them. They've been destroyed.
Well, like, did they continue? I always ask everybody, because during the Depression, that was such a change in everybody's life. Did they continue printing during the Depression?
They continued right on printing. They sure did. My dad told me, he said that we were so poor that we were already in a depression years and years before the one was declared. So as he said, my dad said, you know, it really didn't affect us much because we weren't used to anything, and we just rocked along. But the equipment down there, a lot of the equipment down there came from the Parish Daily Advocate, where my dad worked over there. He bought a lot of their equipment, he and his dad, and brought it over here to Trenton. And proudly displayed on some of it is that Parish Daily Advocate, which we still have, the original owners of it. And it dates back, well, two presses down there are 1885 models. They were made in 1885. And that's about the oldest pieces of equipment that I've got. I've got a paper cutter that was built in 1897. Then I've got the handset type that's survived all of these many years, which is way over 100 years old, some of it. And it did take a lot to produce a newspaper back then compared to what it does now. Of course, the newspapers weren't anything as elaborate as today's papers are. All the type was set by hand, a letter at a time, out of type cases. They call them California trays, is what one terminology of it is. And all the type that was in the newspaper was composed one letter at a time. Then in 1926, my dad bought the modern marvel of printing. He purchased a used linotype from Dallas, and then started using the linotype to compose type.
Tom Mac, did you always, from a very early age, did your daddy teach you how to do that?
Oh,
Did you help?
Yes, he did. Yes.
When all the other kids were having to go work in the farm, you were helping him, right?
That's right. I tell you what, there's one thing, my Uncle Gus raised cotton, and I picked cotton for my Uncle Gus and about a season, and I decided right then there was something easier. And so I helped my dad. I started in 1945 up there as a print, and I was known as a printer's devil. That's when someone starts out in the printing business. But you were talking about how printing has changed. It has just totally changed. It's nothing compared to the even the years that I've been in it. Computers have just played whaley with the printing that I grew up with. It's just no more because all these farms are in a computer. There's no need for them anymore. But we do very little printing down there anymore, but we still have the paper. And we're mighty, mighty proud of it.
And everybody continues to be proud of the paper, because I read every week somebody calls writes a letter thanking you for the paper and for renewing their subscription, because there are people from Trenton are scattered all over the world, and I think that's such a touch from home. I know when I didn't live here, I still...
You always got the paper. Miss Annie Mae saw to that. I remember that in Ed.
I know.
I'm thankful for the response I get and the compliments I get. Of course, every now and then it's not all compliments, but
somebody does.
I very much appreciate the comments about the paper.
It's such a...
They're kind to say it.
It's a treasure.
Well, you're kind to say that, JoAnne. I appreciate that coming from you, little
girl.
It
is a treasure. I love it. Well, Tom Mac, tell me more about your Uncle Gus and some. What was he? He was a cotton. He owned a lot of cotton.
He was a farmer, and he raised pigs. I don't ever remember him raising cattle. Now, Uncle Gus and Burris Francis Butler were two of the closest friends that you'll ever see, and of course Burris Francis was a farmer as well, as long as he could make a living at it. And then when he got a job over at the cable plant at Bonham. He still did his farming. Burrs Francis he dealt a lot in cattle, as most of the Butlers did. But Uncle Gus was a farmer, and he loved cotton, and he loved corn. And that was the two crops that he had, and he raised that on the Holmes farm that was here in Trenton, just on the west side of Augusta Street, and butted up the Katy Railroad, and then it went over to the Scales place to the north. And he farmed that. Wasn't very big, but he survived and made a living off that farm. And he was big in cotton. Oh, also my granddad established a gin here, by George, after he first came here. He had his own cotton gin.
I guess we would, in today's terms, we would say he was definitely an entrepreneur, wasn't he?
I suppose you might classify that man as that. I know the laughing stock about him in the family is, why did the man not stop and stay in Dallas instead of moving on north?
Well, you know, it's so funny now in hearing you talk about Pilot Grove, because I grew up, you know, all my life, all my, you know, family and Pilot Grove was a big deal. But when the railroad passed it by, it just, like a lot of other communities, that was the end of that time, was it not?
It was. It killed it. They had a railroad plotted through Pilot Grove, and it never did materialize because of the Denison Southeastern coming, dodging Pilot Grove, actually is what it did. So there was another company, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Gulf, plotted a track through Pilot Grove, but it never did materialize, and thus everyone started leaving Pilot Grove.
I guess Pilot Grove's continuing claim to fame is Benny Binion, who came out of Pilot Grove. So
I've always respected Benny Binion and the Binion family.
Yes, well, there I noticed an ad in today's paper about the horseshoe in Louisiana. So local boy makes good. I think it would be a good thing to say about that.
That's Jack, yeah. And I know went to out to see Mr. Benny at the Horseshoe, and he was so kind and gracious. That's the first time I ever met him, and he asked so many questions about Trenton.
Wasn't that funny? People would always, even though he was big and powerful and all of that, but everybody from Trenton, my mother one time, who didn't want to be seen in a casino, but she did go in to see Benny Binion when she went to Las Vegas one time. She wanted to see him, and of course he treated her really like royalty.
I've always heard and said that if there's anybody from Grayson County or Fanning County, Trenton, Whitewright, Pilot Grove area, Mr. Benny, didn't matter what he was doing, he would always take the time to greet that person,
right,
and treat them with a meal or a room at the Horseshoe.
Right, isn't that?
He was. I don't know.
He was proud of his roots, I think.
Yes, he was, and I was proud of Mr. Benny.
Yeah. Tomac, growing up in Trenton, you know, at the street we lived on, Pearl Street, which I didn't know was at the time was named after your relatives, but talk a little bit about what that street looked like and who some of those early Trenton families that lived on that street.
Well, let's see. We're crossing the railroad on South Pearl. We're going south, and on the right side, the first house that I remember was Mrs. Lizzie Dyer. And the Dyer brothers, the Dyer family was a big plus to Trenton because they were in the pharmacy business. They had a drugstore here. They had a drugstore in Sherman. They had a drugstore in Garland. They had a drugstore in Farmersville. They had a drugstore in Henderson. And it all started with Dyer Drug here in Trenton. Harless Dyer and F.M. Dyer, Jake Dyer, Ben Dyer, and Miss Lizzie lived there in that first house that I remember. The next house going south on the same side, I remember Eugene Wilson, who worked here at the bank. He and his family lived there.
Now you know, and that's the house I live in now.
Now that house has been relocated, and that's your home.
And that's my home. And that's why it's so special to me, because of its early Trenton history.
Well, that's true. And then Claire C. Dotson lived in that house for many, many years.
Yes.
And then the next house was the Huff home place. And Miss Mamie Huff, I barely can remember Miss Mamie lived in that house. And then when she passed away, the Huff family sold it to Dee and Bess Patterson, and they lived there.
And it's still known as the Patterson House.
True. Then the next house, going south, as far back as I can remember, it was Summers.
Yes, that's who lived there when I was growing up.
Right.
It was Miss Mamie and
I believe it's Mamie Summers.
Mamie Summers, and her mother lived there when I was growing up.
That's true. Miss Sheedy?
Miss Sheedy, that's it. That's exactly who
We're
it was.
together, we're getting this together, aren't we, little girl? Then, of course, the next house on down was Jonathan Ruth's, who was an early merchant here in Trenton with the great Ruth and Sutherland dry goods store here and grocery store. That the Ruth family played a big part of this Trenton history as early merchants with that with that department store and the grocery store, Ruth and Sutherland and Company. Then on down next was another merchant here by the name of Pheno Sutherland, and Pheno and his wife Pearl Enzer was her maiden name, built that house. That house is no longer there. It burned about 2 years ago. And that was their home.
And that was a beautiful home. And remember, she had that wonderful fish pond. Every time I see that fish pond is still there. Okay, we're back again. We're getting ready to continue. We're thinking about all the people who contributed to early Trenton history and lived on South Pearl Street. We've been talking about where
We stopped at
talk.
Pheno Sutherland's house. We were heading
We're
south down Pearl going south on the right side, and as we were saying, Mr. Pheno was in the lumber business here for a long time.
And Tom, as I recall, he was involved in politics too. Was it he or his son, or who was involved in?
Well, now, that was another Sutherland.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, when we get back to the other side of the street, Pheno never was, that I know. Now, his son was an architect in Austin. Page and Sutherland. Enzer Sutherland was a doctor. One of them was a doctor in Sherman, Dr. Enzer Sutherland. And then he had another son, Louis Sutherland, I believe is what his name was. He was a big architect, a successful architect in Austin. We're talking about Pheno and Miss Pearl Sutherland now. And then the next house was that of M.G. Davis, and he was a ginner here. He was very successful in the ginning business here in Trenton, and that house was built by Mr. Riley, E.E. Riley, and I think Mr. Riley lived there first, and then M.G. Davis bought it from Mr. Riley. And by the way, Mr. Riley is the one that developed that Pearl Street south of the railroad track. That's known as the Riley Addition. And then another addition south of the railroad track was the Butler Addition. Then we go on from L.F. Sutherland's house to the M.G. Davis home. Then let's see, the one next going south from Mr. Davis was
Allison, wasn't it?
no, before Merritt.
Merritt.
Merritt family lived there, and then the Allisons
Allisons.
bought it, I think, from the Merritts. The next one was Miss Mattie Parks. It's no longer there. Who was a very good friend of mine. Used to get butter from Miss Mattie and go down there and visit with her. She was a sweet lady. She had about a 1933 Chevrolet sedan parked in the garage, which was driven maybe one Sunday a month and cared for like a baby. That's one thing I remember about Miss Mattie. And then on down from that was the Scales, originally the Scales home. Tom Scales, who was a big landowner here in the Trenton area. And then after the Scales, after Mr. Tom died, it was sold to Ed Riley and Susan, and they made their home there for many years. As a matter of fact, they were both living there when they passed away. That house had a lot of history to it. Ed Riley was a merchant here in Trenton, and he was a very likable guy, and I thought so much of Ed Riley. And Ed Riley, he was a staunch Democrat, and he let that be known. And if Ed and I would get in a conversation, and my dad and Ed would get in conversations, we'd usually both take the opposite sides of what Ed stood for. And that would be the biggest gosh awfulest debate going on. Of course, we were all mighty close friends. And finally, Ed caught on what we were doing. And I don't think he liked it too much. But then from Ed's house on down was where Kenneth and Norma Moore live today, was the Blades home. Mr. Blade worked for, well, let's see. He worked for maybe Mr. Reed at the hardware store, Y.B. Reed. And they lived there. And then after the Blades, Mr. Blade died there, and Miss Blades relocated. Then Charlie Hill and his bride, Rubitina, and bought the house and redid it.
And that's the house now where the Fannin County Sheriff lives, isn't
That's
it?
right. Our Fannin County Sheriff and his wife live
in that house
there.
now.
And then the next one is where I currently live, and that was the Hancock home. That house was built in 1920 or 21 after the tornado, 1919, destroyed the Hancock home place, which was on just a little south of Trenton and west off of Pearl Street. They built that house. And my daddy and mother bought it in 1934 when they married, and we've lived in it since. It's had two owners, the Hancocks and the Holmes, and at one time J.R. and Mabel Coolidge resided there before my mother and dad bought it. Mr. Coolidge was the Katy Railroad depot agent here in Trenton.
So, Tom Mack, you've lived in the same house since you were born, except when you went away to college and when you went to the Army.
When I was in service, yeah. I've lived there. Sure have.
I think that
all the time.
I think that's a great accomplishment. I read in the paper this morning about a couple living somewhere who lived in the same house for 78 years. So I won't ask you how many years you lived there, but I know it's a long time.
About 71. I'm right behind them.
You're right behind them. And then the next house was?
That was, well, my mind slips me right now. Brother Thomas Reese lived there. That was Raines family home originally. That was the original Raines family home, and to save me, I can't remember what Mr. Raines and Ms. Raines' name were. But the first I remember living there was Brother Thomas Reese, who was Justice of the Peace, and he was a Baptist preacher out at East Shady Grove, not West Shady Grove, East Shady Grove Baptist Church. And he moved into Trenton from an area around the Lee Graveyard, which is located west and a little south of Leonard. He and his wife moved to that house, and they lived there up until Mr. Reese's death. Thomas Reese was also our Justice of the Peace here in Precinct 2, if I didn't mention that.
Yes, and there used to be a steady stream of
you remember that? I remember, JoAnne, when they brought in the radar. And can you remember it?
I just remember there were a steady stream of people
That's
going to
right.
that house paying those
Yeah, they were
fines.
either paying fines or wanting to get married. Brother Reese married a lot of people in that house. And he'd get me over there from time to time to bring my guitar and to provide a little ceremonial music. Up until one time I sang a song which I shouldn't, and I won't go into that, but he never asked me to come back again to do that as a boy.
It was not
appropriate by any means.
Wasn't DIVORCE, was it?
No. Something about a wife that was nagging her husband all the time. Leody Johnson, a guy I knew, came up with that song. And so I proudly displayed it over there one time at a ceremony. And the couple kind of liked it, but Brother Reese, he didn't cotton to it very much. From the Reese house, the next house, there was a vacant lot in there, which at one time my dad owned. It was owned by Pee Wee Reed. My dad sold it to Pee Wee Reed, and it was vacant at the time. Today, the house where Rodney Alexander lives is located there. That was built by Rodney's grandmother, Laura Reed Butler. And then the next house to that was Laura and Dolly's home place. Laura married Dolly Butler, James M. Dolly Butler, by the way. And they resided there up until the time that they built the house where Rodney lives now. And first people I remember living in that house where Dolly and Laura lived most of their married life was Charlie Richardson. And his wife lived there at one time. And then there was, from that continuing south, there was a big vacant pasture in there. And then the next home was that of Y.B. Reed, which still stands today in all its mighty glory and is one of Trenton's treasured homes that has remained just like it was, really. Y.B.'s grandson, Jimmy Reed, and his wife, Kay, have spent a lot of time and effort and money in keeping that house original, and they've succeeded in doing so. From there on, going down south, was the home of T.C. Brookins and his wife Zella. They moved here from Randolph and built that house back, I don't know, about 43, 42, somewhere along in there. Then the next house on down was there at the corner, and that was John Uten and his wife's home place.
And that's kind of the last house.
And that was the last one. That was the last one.
And Mr. Uten owned a filling station, did he?
John Uten owned the Magnolia Service Station here in Trenton, which was on Pearl Street. It would have been on the east side of Pearl Street. It was a big building there, ironclad building, and he proudly sold Magnolia gas and oil. Now coming back, if we want to start back on the right side of South Pearl, on the left side of South Pearl, going south. First house I remember was that of the Pullum family, which Stanley and Cecile Kitchen lived in that for a good while, and I think Cecile's grandmother lived there. And then about 1950, Mac and Euleen Shaw bought it and rejuvenated it, and they lived there their married life until their deaths. I don't know who lives there now. The next house was the T.W. Ayers home place, which Mr. Ayers had T.W. Ayers and Son dry goods store here in Trenton, which was located just next door to the bank where we are now. And that house has been kept intact pretty much, but to save me, I don't know who lives there now.
I met that young man.
I've met him too. Nice people.
Nice people.
Yeah.
The thing about, I'm so happy that they rescued that house, because for a while it had really deteriorated, and then someone came in and rescued it, and it is a lovely place now.
That's true. That house at one time was a rest home.
Yes, I remember.
Ms. Bob Chapman opened that up as a rest home and converted it somewhat to a degree to a rest home. That was the first rest home Trenton had. And that must have been back about 1955, 56, in that era. Miss Chapman didn't stay there long. She moved to a location on North Pearl Street. From there on, after the Ayers home was the home of Walter and Ben Huff. Walter Huff was postmaster here in Trenton for many, many years. And he married Ben Lemon, and they never had any children. But they lived in that house. Ben lived there up until, both of them lived there until their deaths. The next house was that of B.T. Sutherland, and we were brought up that name back here on the tape a little bit. You were asking the question. B.T. and Ina Sutherland lived in that house for many, many years, and it's only had two owners after their son Bill, who had a grocery store here in Trenton for a number of years, Sutherland Grocery. It was a spin-off of the old Ruth and Sutherland dry goods and grocery store here. Resided there. When he passed away in about 61, I think, when Bill died, Johnny and Linwood Coleman bought it, and they own it today. Linwood is deceased, and Johnny is now in the Leonard Nursing Home. B.T. and Ina Sutherland, they were assets to Trenton, and so was their family. One of their sons, Edward Sutherland, became an attorney, and he practiced law in Bonham for many, many, many years up until his death. They had a daughter, Teresa, who married Mr. G, and Teresa lived in Sulphur Springs. And they had another daughter by the name of Lucille, who married Gomer Wilson, and she also lived in Sulphur Springs. Gomer was an oil consignee down there for a long time, very successful businessman in Sulphur Springs. And Lucille and Teresa were both accomplished musicians. Lucille taught piano in Sulphur Springs just about her entire life. And they were special to Trenton. That the Sutherland family was special to Trenton. And
Miss Ina's grandson he's a columnist for the Denison paper.
That's Mikey. Ed and Jean, his wife, had 3 sons. There was Mike and Steve and Bruce. Mike and Steve and Bruce reside in Sherman now, and Mike is, or Ed as he goes by, his byline in the Herald Democrat, is a very noted columnist up there and does a super job in writing stories of interest for this area for the Herald Democrat. And by the way, Mike, or Ed as he's known now, was an attorney, and he practiced law in Atlanta, Georgia, for a period of time before he relocated back here to Texas and came to Sherman, where he and his brother Steve and Bruce live now. Well, let's see, JoAnne, the next house, you're going to have to hit me here.
Well, it was I guess it was a vacant lot until William Summers built a house
before
there.
That,
was there a house
there was a house there. Wig and J.P. Summers' parents had a house there, and it burned on that lot. And so then Wig and Tawlee built that house. What year did you say that was in?
About 50, maybe 1950.
Okay.
No, 40, 48, 49.
Somewhere along in there, they built that house, which still stands. And they lived there until they moved to Whitewright. Mm-hmm. They lived there a long time because they were your neighbors. And then the next house was where your mom and dad lived after they moved into town. What year?
1947.
1947.
And that
with a little girl by the name of JoAnne and a son by the name of Bill.
And they bought that house from I think the Walsh. Did Mr. and Miss Walsh, Raymond Walsh, did they have a grocery store here? Do you remember that?
No.
Ike Walsh.
I don't remember them having a grocery store here. That house and the one next to it, which were twin homes originally, were built by Charlie Hill. They were built the same time. You shared the same driveway. Did you share the same garage?
No, we shared the same driveway, which was the thorn in my daddy's side his entire time he lived.
Yeah, it was just concrete runners, wasn't it? And I meant there wasn't much space between the two houses to allow for driving a car.
Yes, my mother lived there from 1947 until her death in 1999.
And that was Ed and Annie Mae Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
Ed and I served on the city council of Trenton for quite a number of years, and I always appreciated Ed and his beliefs for Trenton and the betterment of Trenton. And he was a great asset to Trenton the years he served on the city council. Ed was also a farmer, wasn't he?
Yes.
Your mother taught school. Your mama taught school. Pilot Grove.
No, she taught it.
A.C. Walker?
Yes.
A.C. Walker instead of Pilot Grove.
Right, and Kentucky Town, and then she went to Leonard, and stayed at Leonard a long time, and then finished her career here in Trenton.
Didn't she teach a star school up around Sherman at one time?
She taught at Kentucky Town, and she taught at she taught at several places in Grayson County, because every time we went to Sherman, we used to see people she had taught.
Right.
I'd stop on the street.
Right.
And my mother could remember all those kids' names.
She had a remarkable
She had a
memory.
remarkable memory for those kids' names. I wish I could do that. I remember the kids, I just can't remember their names.
And Miss Annie Mae always stayed abreast on current affairs.
Yes, she did.
She had the past about her, but she didn't dote upon the past. She was always ready for the future and what the future would bring and be prepared for it. I remember her so much. And everybody I've talked to that went to school, she never taught me. She was teaching at Leonard when I was in school, and she was a girls' basketball coach down there, I believe, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
And, but everybody spoke favorable things about their teacher, Miss Annie Mae Reagan, that I've known. And about
we
your
lived
dad as well, Ed
Yeah.
Reagan. He was a dear and close friend of mine. We shared a lot of things together in life. The next house was that of Walter and Lizzie McClary, which was another one of the houses that C.W. Hill bought. Now, I don't remember, but I remember the people now you're talking about that lived in your mother and dad's house. His name was Virgil Lee.
Oh,
He was the one that had the grocery store.
I knew there
V.H. Lee. He had a
Yeah.
grocery store.
I remember. I knew there was something about the grocery store.
Yeah, and then H.B. McMahon, who was a Katy Depot agent, lived there for a brief period of time. I do remember that. He had a son by the name of H.B. Jr., and H.B. and I used to play. And I think they lived there just before
we did.
y'all did. And then the next house, after Walter and Lizzie McClary, Walter drove a bus for Trenton ISD, I guess. He probably drove one of the first buses the school ever acquired. And he drove that up for years and years. And are we doing all right over there, little girl?
Yes, I just checking to make sure it's
All
still
right,
recording.
it's still a clicking. Then the next house from that going south was that of Lola McCollum. Lola never married. She lived there up until her death, I think. And she shared that house. She was good enough to share that house with Tom and Lou Cunningham for up until her death. They lived there with her. Uncle Tom, as he was known by everyone around here, was vocational ag teacher here in Trenton. And what can we say about Uncle Tom? What can we say?
Uncle Tom kind of says it all.
He
wasn't
kind of said it all. One of the most admired men and one of the teachers that I will never, never, never forget. And how much I learned from Tom Cunningham about life and how to act around people, and so much.
He practiced that we talk about so much now. Is he had high expectations for his students. He expected people to behave appropriately and know what to do.
He did, and he had a sense of foolishness about him that he would draw you on, but he knew when the foolishness would end and the hard facts of life would begin to his students. And we all call him Uncle Tom.
And Aunt Lou.
And
She
Lou.
probably never meant to be called Aunt Lou, but because he was Uncle Tom,
Uncle
we
Tom, yeah.
all called her Aunt Lou.
Yeah.
And you remember, Tom Mack, they cared so much. There was a young woman here in town that her family moved away, and she didn't have any place to live. And do you remember that they took her in so that she could finish high school here?
I certainly do. Her parents died.
Is that what I'd forgotten what
Her
happened, but
parents
I remember.
died. She had no place to go, but there was always a warm spot there at Lou and Tom Cunningham's home for anybody.
Right.
I've spent many a happy hour over there with him, helping him putter around this and that, and mowing his grass for him. I loved the man. I just can't say enough good about him. He will stand out in my life as a true friend, Tom Cunningham. Then the next house was that of Holmes and Sally Joe Conley. And what shall we say about them? Holmes had the Conley Drug Store. He started out with the Dyer brothers, which we talked about prior, and who had the big drug chain. And he became a partner in this store here with B&R, and then Holmes bought the Dyers out, and he operated that up until he could no longer operate it. And Sally Jo Gowdy was her maiden name, and she came from Whitewright. And they spent their entire married life there. They had one daughter, Elaine, who married a veterinarian, Dr. D.D. White. They're all gone except Dr. White. He's a resident of the veterans home at Bonham now. What is that retirement part of it? Moss Cosper?
I've forgotten.
I can't remember now.
And he lives there now.
He lives there now.
And Tomac, isn't that Elaine's son-in-law that has the winery?
That's right. That's Bob.
Bob
White has
he
Texoma
retired.
Winery.
Yes, he retired and moved back to this part of the country and opened that winery.
That's the son. That's Elaine's boy, Bob White, and he operates the winery up there, and it's quite a process to go up there and see all the equipment that Bob has located up there in his winery. I suggest that if you'd like an education, go up there and visit it.
It's such a lovely place too, out
Absolutely.
in the country. It's a lovely place to visit.
Absolutely. But Holmes and Sally Jo, as we said, lived there their entire married life. Sally Jo was the first to go, followed by her husband Holmes, who passed away a few years after Sally Jo up at Whitewright Nursing Home. Then the next house was built by Alfred and Irene Hughes, and they spent their entire life there. Alfred had A.J. Hughes grocery store here in Trenton, which was on Pearl Street, and he was known as the cash grocer here in Trenton. And Alfred maintained that store up until his death. He died suddenly at home, and but he was able to continue with that store up until his sudden death.
Then and you say it was the cash store because the rest of the grocery stores would let you buy on credit, but you had to pay cash at Mr. Hughes.
No, that wasn't the case. He tried it and it didn't work, but he kept the name, the cash grocer. Yeah, he tried it. Lyda Pearl Holloman worked for Alfred in that store for many, many, many years. Then on the next house going south was that of Pearl Conley. She and Will built that house. Back up. I don't know if her husband had passed away when that house was built or not. I think he had already died when she built that house. But she raised a family there alone in that home. And we've discussed them before as some of my relatives. Then the next house was that of Mr. and Mrs. Brown. What was W.T. Brown? Was that Carlene's mother?
I remember vaguely that.
Yeah, and they called him Sheeny. His nickname was Sheeny. But to save me, I can't think what his name was. Maybe I'll think of it later on. They lived there up until Miss Brown's death, and Sheeny Brown died while they were living there back in the 40s sometime. Then there was no other house until Phineas and Carlene, who Carlene was Miss Brown's daughter. They built that house in 1950. That is there now. But before that, it was a vacant lot, and the next house on down was that of Hugh Bailey, who who lived there. And we were talking about John Newton and his Magnolia Station. Well, Hugh Bailey at one time had that Magnolia Station that John Newton had, and somehow they just kind of swapped service station locations. But Hugh Bailey ran that service station, which was also on Pearl Street, just kind of across the street from John Newton's Magnolia Station for a long time, as long as he could able to keep it going. And Miss Bailey, there was always music ringing out of that house. They had a piano up in the front room, and you could hear her at night. Well, you'd go by there and you'd hear Miss Bailey in there playing the piano. They had a daughter, Nona, Miss Nona Bailey, who was a school teacher. She taught here in Trenton for a number of years, and then she went to Dallas. And do you remember?
She taught at Highland Park.
And okay, she taught in Highland.
But she came home on the weekends, did she not?
Absolutely, she sure did.
She was a lovely, lovely lady.
She taught first grade, I think, here in Trenton. She never did teach me. I think by the time I started, she had relocated to Dallas. And you said Highland Park. And then let's see, from the Bailey home place, the next one. Well, I've drawn a blank on that one.
Yeah.
That's where Johnny Hutchins.
Yes, that's who I remember living
But I'm
there.
trying to think of the people that originally lived there.
Yeah, Johnny Hutchins lived there when I was growing up.
Johnny and Effie bought that house from this family and moved down there when the Highway 121 conglomeration was started out here on North Pearl Street. It took in the home that they lived in, so they had to relocate. So they chose that home. Hooper. That was the Hooper home. Yeah. And that they bought it from the Hooper estate. And now, I think that originally was all of them. Up to the locker plant.
I think so. And then, and in the days before, before zoning, we didn't know what zoning was in Trenton, and we had the locker plant come in and right down in the middle of the.
Yeah. And at the time, we were mighty proud to get that.
I know.
We were mighty proud to get that.
And we're still
proud to have it in operation today.
That's right. They do a big, I think they do a big business. That's certainly an asset to Trenton.
Yes, it is.
But I think it's funny because nowadays they probably wouldn't allow a processing plant to be built in a residential area.
Well, when that was built, there really wasn't that much residential.
It was south of the residential area.
True, yeah, because I think the house that Johnny and Effie Hutchins lived in was the last house
on that deal.
Yeah. Well, there was a Brookins home across the street, but the thing of it is, when they built the locker plant, they got T.C. Brookins' daughter Thelma provided her a job over there at the locker plant when it first sold.
Well, it's great to think about all those people who made such contributions to Trenton, and it's such a special part of all of our memories. And you were talking about the music that came from the Bailey house. Well, Tom Mack, I remember the music that came from your house, and your mother, I assume, is the one who helped instill that love of music in your life, because I don't think we ever had a program in Trenton when I was a kid that your mother didn't sing, and or you, and you learned to play. Tell me, is that where you got your love of music?
I inherited that from the McClure family. My granddad, John McClure, was a fiddle player. He was a frontier fiddle player. I still have his violin. And he traveled all over the country at one time in West Texas when they were developing out there, and he could make a buck playing at a house dance or something like that. And he loaded up his fiddle, and he would go out there and entertain the people out there. He had to give that up though, because his wife didn't much like it. But anyway, the musical ability came from the McClures, and my mother was
she had a beautiful voice, and she didn't dwell on an instrument. She'd play the piano a little bit, and she wanted me to take piano, which I did, but I didn't like it because I always thought I was a sissy if I was sitting at a piano. So I was determined I was gonna play some instruments. So I asked one Christmas for a Montgomery Ward guitar, and they gave it to me. So I started taking guitar lessons from a teacher in Bonham who was the band director over there at the Bonham School, and that's where I learned to play guitar, basically.
How old were you because I can't ever remember when you didn't play the guitar. So how old were you?
I must have been about between 8 and 9 years old.
Yeah, see, because I always remembered that you could play the guitar.
Because I had to wait that long for my hands to grow. Oh, I started out with a ukulele, and they started me out on a ukulele before that, where I could move my fingers around to make the chords. That was one of the processes that somebody thought of, and it worked. I still have my calluses from playing guitar. When you play guitar, you've got to have on your left hand. You have to build up calluses, or you're out of luck, because pressing down on those strings is kind of hard. And
well, all your life you've been around music and entertained and been with lots and lots, I know, of famous musicians and almost famous in your own right. Aren't you a member of the Western Swing Hall of Fame?
I remember the Texas Western Swing Hall of Fame.
I knew you were. What an honor that is. And
I was proud of that.
We're proud of you in Trenton for doing that, and I don't know if we could ever had a program or anything that we could all. That everybody would always say, "Well, get Tom Mack to sing," and we've all just grown up with you.
Well,
doing
they were kind to put up with all that stuff.
Oh no, you were very talented. So
I had a lot of fun doing it.
Didn't you sing on the Louisiana Hayride at one time?
I went to Louisiana to get a job. I was an electrician. I was a master electrician. And work played out up here. Everything was overbuilt in the 50s. And I thought, I'd listen to the Louisiana Hayride on the radio. And I'd listen to Big D Jamboree on the radio. The Big D Jamboree turned me down, so I thought, I will go to the Louisiana Hayride. So I went down there, and I knew the first thing you had to do was have an agent. And downtown Shreveport, there was a gentleman by the name of Tillman Franks. And I remember I went in that office of Tillman's and talked to the secretary, who was his wife, but I didn't know it at the time. She's on off, said, he doesn't need anybody, nobody. I said, who does? And she told me there was a guy there that Mike could use me as a singer. So I went out and talked to him, and his name was Paul Howard. And his band was called the Arkansas Cotton Pickers. So I teamed up with Paul Howard and the Arkansas Cotton Pickers and went on a tour with him. And at the time, he had a 1954 Cadillac. And boy, that was something that I wasn't used to, is traveling in a 1954 Cadillac. So we did our engagements there. And he told me, he said, you go back to Tillman and see if Tillman can't use you, and that I'll recommend you. And so I did. And Tillman said, can't use you on the hayride because they don't need anybody now, but I tell you what, we've got this hayride backup group. And so we'll put you on there. So Buzz Busby and his Bayou Boys and old Tom Hack, we headed out for points in Louisiana. Now, we didn't have a Cadillac 54 Cadillac limousine to take those tours in. We just did any way we could. But we would promote the Louisiana Hayride in places in Louisiana, especially Gladewater over in Texas. That was the hot spot for that music then, for the hayride. If it wasn't for Texas, the hayride probably never would have made it, because that's where they drew their crowds. Louisiana just didn't support it.
They were more into Cajun, weren't they?
Yes, they were. They truly were. Yeah.
Not into the.
That's very true. They were, but then I saw that there was no security, job security, or anything in that music, so I just gave it up and pursued the electrical trade up until the time my dad got sick in 1958, and then I started taking. My mother and I took over the Tribune. My mother became associated with the Tribune. Her name was Edith McClure, and she became associated with the Tribune in 1934, and she passed away in 1993. And the day before we lost her, she was down at the Tribune, sitting at the desk greeting people when they came in. So she had a long tenure with the newspaper as well.
Right. And Tom Mack, so tell me, I know even though you were an electrician by trade, and then you took over the Tribune, and that's been your, but you have so many interests, and have continued with the music kind of as a hobby, which I think is a wonderful thing, and we are all so glad you did.
Well, I'm proud I did too. I enjoy it. I've been associated with some mighty good people in it, and I never was. I was always a side man. I never did. When I was in it, I was always glad to get that job side man, because I didn't want that a star. Because I know a star can only go one way when he goes up, and that's down. Of course, that's true of everything. But I've worked with a lot of them. I had my mother would go to Dallas. She'd ride the Interurban to Dallas, and they would use her for commercials. A guy by the name of Jim Boyd got my mother a job doing commercials down there for a company that produced radio commercials, and she would singing jingles, and she did that for a while, and she enjoyed it, and I'd go down there with her, and we did a lot of that at WFA, or she did a lot of it at WFAA, but most of it was done at Sellers Recording Studio, which was there on Main Street in Dallas, and she would get $10 or something. She'd ride the Interurban down there, and then do the singing part of that studio, and that's really where I started meeting people. I remember I met several singers down there, and at those WFAA and Mr. Sellers. They called him Pappy Sellers at his recording studio, and I enjoyed it. But I knew that I couldn't survive on wages as a musician, and so
It's not just as all glamour, is it?
Absolutely not. There's
work.
Millions of them out there.
I know.
And they're all seeking the same thing, and there's just not enough room.
That's right.
But I always enjoyed singing. I always enjoyed playing the guitar.
And you still do you?
I still play it, yeah.
Yes.
I was out at Weatherford Mineral Wells the 1st of November with Roy Lee Brown and the musical Brownies, which his brother was Milton Brown, who really founded this Western swing music. And his brother survives today and still plays and sings. And we had a revival out there, 2 shows out there, which we had a good time the 1st of November. And I still enjoy it.
Yes. Well, and swing, in addition to Western swing music has made a big comeback, and I think Western swing is a big deal right now too, is it not?
it comes and goes. It's on the downside right now, but it'll come back.
Yeah.
That's like music. I mean, what comes around, it'll
Right.
come around again.
Comes around. Well, Tom Mack, this has been just great, and I tell you how much we appreciate this and your knowledge about Trenton and just all the things. This will be a great remembrance for Fannin County, because it's so important for people to remember all the kinds of things, and your memory's incredible. Maybe you're not as old as I thought you were.
Old enough. Thank you, JoAnne. It's been a pleasure being here. I've enjoyed the conversation with you, and
well, me too.
The next one, you're going to be on the hot seat, and I'm going to be asking the question.
You're going to be interviewing me.
There you go, little girl.
Thank
you,
you.
JoAnne.